I'm a moonlight, in order to save money to buy a house, but also to avoid all kinds of unnecessary human contacts. From the first day of employment, I opened an account and lied that I had a child to raise, then put a sum of money into it every month. At first, there was indeed some rumors, but over time, my single mother's personality has been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people, so any activity that spends money will try to avoid me. I also have a deposit as a result. Everything was perfect, until I saw the news that my favorite singer was going to have a concert. I began to struggle. You can save money at any time, but concerts don't just go to them, and I don't really want to raise children, so it shouldn't be okay to spend a sum of money to go out. After convincing myself, I started grabbing tickets. A colleague saw it and taunted me. Didn't you say you wanted to raise a child? And money to watch concerts. Everyone is going to raise money to buy birthday gifts for the director. Since you have spare money, why don't you give more? She had a point, so I decided to consolidate the character again. A poor, self-reliant single mother. I posted a circle of friends. Milk powder is so expensive, and your salary is going to run out again. But it doesn't matter, as long as you grow up healthy. Your mother can do anything. The accompanying picture is a dry steamed bun. Since then, no one has dared to ask me to pay the leader to make a fool of myself. I'm also happy to save money. However, I can please my boss without spending money, but I can't help but please myself. My favorite out-of-print game skin is back for a limited time. At that time, because I had just graduated and had a meager income, I couldn't buy it, so I coveted other people's out-of-print skins all the time for 4 years. Now that I have the ability, I have to rush. But just a second before I made the payment, I hesitated. It's not very expensive, but all my money has a clear purpose. If you want to buy this skin, you will have to use the money for raising the cubs. I struggled so hard that I didn't sleep all night, and I didn't even look carefully at the contact information of my new boss. When my colleague asked me to add it the next day, I stared at the cactus next to my computer and began to thorn one by one. Buy, don't buy, buy. The last thorn was pulled out, just right. The one I bought, I hid in the toilet like a thief and secretly ordered a skin. Just as I was about to come out, I heard a colleague talking outside. The new boss is here. We have to show a little bit, right? I also think that if you brush your face in front of your new boss, you can talk about the promotion later. While they were discussing which gift was more high-end and elegant, I came out of the bathroom cubicle with 2 huge dark circles under my eyes. The discussion came to an abrupt end. In the middle of the night, another female colleague sounded with some sympathy. It's hard to stay up late with children, right? I replied, a little stunned. I thought they would look at me pitifully, and they wouldn't take me with them when they bought gifts and patted me. But who knows? They forced me to pay a sum of money, on the grounds that they couldn't make a bad impression on my new boss. No more, no less, just 1 month's salary. If you want to survive next month, you have to use the money in the cub fund. Ha, leave me alone. That night, I watched as the money in the cub raising, buying a house, fund became less and less. I was angry and posted a circle of friends. Actually, this child doesn't have to be raised. Shortly after it was sent, someone commented on me. I fixed my eyes on it. Morton Joe. Obviously he has been deleted after the breakup. When will he appear in my list again? I thought it was my insanity caused by too much resentment, but I ignored it and planned to delete it again. But as soon as he clicked on his avatar, he received several messages one after another. A year old. When? Don't throw him. You have something to say. It's over. According to the illusion created by my circle of friends, my cub is 1 year old this year, and I broke up with Morton Joe for less than 2 years. He must have thought I had run away with the kids. I don't know how to explain it, and I deleted Morton Joe's weshit with my hands. Because of last night's episode, I didn't sleep well all night. As a result, When I held a welcome meeting for my new boss the next day, I looked haggard and looked like I was dying. The new boss seemed to think that I was affecting the company's image and stood in front of me, about to say something. The colleague next to me kindly explained, "Boss, she is a single mother, and it is very hard to take care of children alone." Originally, I didn't want to explain, but the boss asked, "Single mother, where's the child's father?" I had a direct pupil earthquake. When I looked up, I found that it was my ex-boyfriend, Morton Joe, who was deleted yesterday. I was digging at my toes and trying to explain. "It's not." The kind colleague next to him attacked bravely again. "Oh," she said, "the child's father died." Morton Joe looked at me with a smirk. "Car accident or plane crash?" "Neither." "I don't know. What about the child's father?" "Anyway, the child is dead." JPG smile. From my colleagues, Morton Joe learned that I was struggling to make ends meet. After forcing me to add him back, he started bombarding me like crazy. "Isn't it a little early for a child to use a walker now?" "It's a little early, and I'm not pregnant yet." "How are you doing now?" "I bought you a tonic and gave me the address." "The body is very good, so I didn't have a heart attack." "Forget it, I'll transfer you a sum of money. Don't wrong you and the child." "Very good." Well, I sat up straight and typed to tell him not to mess around. I heard a crisp prompt of 5 million yuan resounding throughout the office. The office suddenly came alive. My colleague slid up to me. "Darlene, you don't have a babysitter at home, right? 5 million. Don't forget each other." "Darlene, I'm my mother's long-lost daughter." I pinched my phone, my mind racing through what to do. Damn Morton Joe, can't he secretly transfer it to me? Feeling the unprecedented enthusiasm of my colleagues, I was in a hurry and explained, "This is my ringtone, reminding me that it's time to drink water." "And how can anyone transfer me 5 million? They made it clear that they didn't believe it." I continued, "I don't even want to buy a bottle of water when I go out. But if someone really transfers me so much money, I have to be carried by someone when I go out." Just when I was racking my brains to fool my colleagues, here comes Morton Joe. His gaze swept over the colleagues around me, and everyone immediately dispersed, huddled in front of the computer, not daring to look up. I was tapping my fingers on the keyboard, and I had no idea what I was doing. Morton Joe wasn't in a hurry, standing behind me and just watching me work. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I took the initiative to raise a smile. "Boss, do you have any instructions?" He stood here a little longer, and not only me, the whole office is going crazy. Morton Joe looked at me for a few seconds and then slowly spoke. "Did you get the money?" My pupils were shaken. "What's he doing?" I finally made everyone believe that the 5 million was fake, and he turned around and came to dismantle my platform. Sure enough, it's an ex-boyfriend, ruthless and hot-handed. Under the inquiring eyes of my colleagues, I asked in a trembling voice, "What money?" The matter has come to this point, and the only way to do it is to pretend to be stupid. If Morton Joe continues to dismantle the stage, I will have to resign and run away. Fortunately, Morton Joe pointed to the mobile phone I put on the table. "I remember that I let people inform you yesterday. You are responsible for this team building, and the funds have been transferred to your card." I turned on my phone, and then I noticed that behind the 5 million, Morton Joe had transferred another amount of money. However, I turned off all the reminders as soon as I received the 5 million, so I didn't see it. Sure enough, it's my ex-boyfriend with a lot of character. The tension suddenly relaxed, and I assured Morton Joe that the team building would be arranged. Morton Joe nodded, and before leaving, he didn't forget to drop a sentence, "Admi Weshit, you are the only one in the whole company." As Morton Joe walked away, my colleagues came to me to discuss the location of the team building. I watched as Morton Joe passed my buddy verification as I recorded everyone's opinions. Almost the first second of passing, Morton Joe sent a message, "I bought some things for you and the kids. Remember to pick them up in the parking lot after work." That's when I remembered that there was still a child. So I explained to him, "There really is no such thing as children. I just talk nonsense." Morton Joe, I see. He doesn't believe it. I continued, "When we were in a relationship, did I cheat on you about anything? I vouch for my personality that the child is really just a random nonsense I made." Morton Joe doesn't post ellipsis this time. He said, "Yes, a lot." The phone froze, and Morton Joe sent a lot of messages in an instant. "We had a breakup. You obviously sent the cat to be neutered, but you had to tell me that you sold it, and later I learned that you wanted to go to the father and keep the son. So according to what I know of you, this time it must be the same. You only want children, not me." It is followed by an aggrieved emoji. I hugged the pillow and wanted to cry without tears. Morton Joe didn't believe the nonsense he made up before, so why did he have to believe it this time? Where am I going to find a child for him? Morton Joe finally sent me a message, "Anyway, you want to go to the father and keep the son." No, my breakup with Morton Joe was also an accident. Every time I got sick or injured, Morton Joe was the first to notice. But the time I was the sickest, he didn't show up. There was already an argument during that time, and I was really fragile after I got sick. So as soon as Morton Joe lost contact, I thought he broke up by default. In a fit of rage, I blocked all of Morton Joe's contact information. Who knew that by accident, he turned out to be my new boss? Also because of my Cub Fund, I firmly believe that there is a child between us. After my colleagues were off work, Morton Joe came to my desk to pick up something in the parking lot with me. I explained again and again that there were no children, and I couldn't use the things he bought. Morton Joe didn't argue with me, but said, "Half of the stuff was bought for you, and you have to take that part." I couldn't resist him, so I had to follow him to the parking lot. Morton Joe had just opened the trunk when I was shocked. A cart full of stuff, half baby and half bought for me. Morton Joe introduced them one by one. "This is to replenish qi and blood. People say that you often have stomach aches and dizziness. It may be that you don't sit well in confinement. You need to make up for it. I bought it for 3 months. You try it first." Looking at Morton Joe's face, I couldn't tell what it was like for a while. "My dear boss, dizziness and stomach ache are my excuses to fish." At Morton Joe's insistence, I had to tearfully carry the tonic in the stroller home. And then, the stroller becomes a cat bed. The team building project was finally set in the luxury mountain villa barbecue with everyone's efforts. Morton Joe gave plenty of money, and I was not polite, and directly helped everyone book the best room and ingredients. In addition, the lodge also has its own hot springs, enough for everyone. In the evening, everyone gathered around for a barbecue. I was forced to sit with a few married colleagues and talk about parenting. Participate. I really don't understand, but if you don't participate, you will fall apart. I had to try my best to reduce my presence and see myself as a backdrop. It's just that when everyone talks about the rise, it's inevitable that they will cue me. "Darlene, are you breast milk or formula?" Me, "Thanks for the invitation. I'll drink water." Seeing that I didn't talk much, they took out another photo and asked me, "Is this your baby?" "It's pretty good." I fixed my eyes on it. "Isn't this a picture of my little niece?" At that time, everyone said that it was exactly the same as when I was a child, and I thought it was fun, so I posted a circle of friends. Coincidentally, Morton Joe happened to come over with a handful of barbecue and stuffed it into my hand. "There are only a few bunches of chili peppers. You can satisfy your cravings. Be careful of stomach pain if you eat too much." After saying this, he looked at a few colleagues on the side and asked, "What are you talking about?" The voices discussing how to raise children came to an abrupt end. I could clearly see them exchanging glances, guessing what Morton Joe was doing with me. Once again, a kind colleague, who explained to Morton Joe that I was a single mom, struck out, "We're looking at Darlene's baby. Who looks like her?" My niece. It's always a little bit alike. But Morton Joe is also a bad eye. His eyes stayed on the photo for a few seconds, and he nodded. It's cute. It's a little girl. Seeing that he had already started to confirm the child's gender with me, I hurriedly took my phone and explained, "This is a picture of my little niece. Of course it looks like me." I didn't expect that my colleagues didn't believe this sentence at all, and trying to prove from every angle that the person in the photo is my daughter. No way. How can a niece be so similar? How do I explain this? How can I explain that my little niece doesn't look like her father or mother, but like my aunt? Sadly, Morton Joe seemed to listen to them, and gave me a meaningful look. He pointed at me and said, "Look, the evidence is conclusive, and you lied to me that you don't have children." Not only that, but while everyone was eating barbecue, Morton Joe came up to me and tentatively said, "Can you send me a few photos? I haven't seen a baby yet." So all night long, I racked my brains to prove to Morton Joe that the person in the picture wasn't our child. I really want to dive headlong into the hot springs and drown myself. After eating the barbecue, I thought that this was the end of today's ordeal. As a result, I don't know who proposed it, saying that we should go to the hot springs together. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to go to the hot springs. I really can't understand it. Plus I just ate the barbecue and had a little stomach upset, so I didn't plan to participate, and I planned to go back to my room to rest. As a result, the colleague who forced me to pay a month's salary to buy a gift for my boss said, "Darlene, I didn't say you. You said that you didn't participate in the previous group activities, and everyone understands that it is not easy for you to be a single mother." She glanced at Morton Joe, who was not far away, and said in a louder voice, "But this time it's the boss who pays for it. If you don't go, it's too shameless, right?" My stomach is really uncomfortable, and my head hurts a little, so I don't have the heart to accompany her to play a blind date and a colleague. He went back on the spot, "If you don't soak in the hot springs together, you won't give face." "Why? You have a crush on me? Do you have to see how I look in my swimsuit? What are you doing?" "Shoot," the boss asked first. It was annoying to see her. After saying that, I got up and went back to my room. As a result, this man didn't know what to think, and insisted that I sit on the shore and talk with them. As soon as I said no, "She kidnapped me. Aren't you embarrassed to spoil everyone's fun?" I rolled my eyes. "You're embarrassed to kidnap me? Why am I embarrassed? Does this hot spring have any restrictions on her? Can't get into the water without me?" Morton Joe heard the commotion and walked over and said, "The activity is voluntary. Don't force your colleagues." As he spoke, he looked at me again. "If you're not feeling well, go back to your room and rest." I nodded and went straight back to my room. After a short sleep, the doorbell rang. It turned out to be Morton Joe, who came to deliver the medicine. When he saw that I was languishing, he dragged me to the hospital. I was so uncomfortable that I didn't struggle. In a daze, I seemed to hear Morton Joe ask the doctor, "She seems to be still breastfeeding. Is there some medicine she can't take?" The doctor asked him, "Are you sure she gave birth?" Morton Joe was silent for a few seconds. "Also, I'm not sure." The doctor looked up at him, as if to ask him if he knew what he was talking about. The more Morton Joe spoke, the more unconfident she became. She said she had a child to raise, but then she said no. "I always thought she only wanted children, and didn't want me to come. I used all my strength to speak. I didn't give birth. She has been accumulating strength for too long, and the sound is very loud, attracting many people to look at us." I silently pulled up my collar to cover my face. I thought to myself, luckily, we weren't in a hospital in the city. Otherwise, I would never dare to set foot in the hospital again for the rest of my life. Morton Joe has been with me to hang bottles. He endured it for a long time, and finally couldn't help it. "So you really just said you wanted to raise children just to save money to buy a house?" I covered my face and nodded. Morton Joe had, "I don't understand. written all over his face. Then you just said that you want to save money, so I really think it's. His expression was a little aggrieved. I leaned back in my chair and sighed. You don't understand our company's culture. That is, you must give gifts to your boss during the New Year's holidays. If I say I'm just trying to save money to buy a house, they'll say I can save whenever I want, and then they'll ask me to take out my salary, so I can only set up a single mother for myself, and I can save money whenever I want, but they can't starve my own children to death in order to make me shoot some off art, right? Except for this point, which seems to be a bit of a serious illness. The company is very good. At that time, I was talking nonsense. Who knew that my colleagues would really believe it? And this reason successfully helped me turn down 80% of the ineffective social interactions. It's even better than a one-size-fits-all formula. Morton Joe nodded. Learned. The next second, he looked at me expectantly. Since you don't have children, why don't you leave the children behind? Morton Joe tries to change, leave the father and leave the son, into, leave the father and leave the father. I don't speak. Morton Joe wasn't discouraged either. For the next few days, he followed me, expressing his intention to be on top all the time. Sometimes I ignore him and make me responsible, but I thought about it all night and couldn't figure it out. How could my colleagues, who should have been playing happily at the resort, suddenly show up in the hospital? I also happened to bump into Morton Joe and I were coquettish. At the moment, 7 or 8 colleagues across from me were staring at me, and Morton Joe in amazement. I reacted quickly and quickly switched to supporting Morton Joe, that, the boss has an upset stomach and can't walk, so I'm just holding him up. Morton Joe turned his head to look at me, and was about to speak when I was glared at me. He had no choice but to cooperate with me. Yes, my stomach must hurt today. Holding his stomach, his colleague trotted over to Morton Joe and volunteered to help him pay the bill. After finishing speaking, she also glanced at me. Darlene, you still have to be a human being. How can you let the boss do such a thing as paying fees? I let go of Morton Joe's arm and said to her, please. She was about to pay the bill when Morton Joe took the slip out of her hand. I'm not close enough to exploit my subordinates. Chloe, am I? Take care of your business capabilities, and don't clean up the useless. Chloe's face turned blue and white. I helped Morton Joe in the other direction. It wasn't until he was completely out of their sight that Morton Joe glanced at what was in his hand. I still want to rush with me to pay for my daughter-in-law. Dreaming. I paused for a moment and pulled Morton Joe around the wheel. Before Morton Joe could react, where are you taking me? I quickened my pace. I'll take you to the psychiatric department. My paranoia is quite serious. Morton Joe. When I got home, I saw that I had been pulled into a group, and we had already chatted more than 1,400 in the group. I knew Darlene didn't have a good relationship with her boss. Look at the boss grievances that don't get a name. So, someone really transferred $5 million to Darlene. That kid can't be the boss, right? I think I know some great secret. Thanks to Jackson for that handful of undercooked beans. Otherwise we wouldn't have seen such a big scene. As we chatted, someone began to discuss what gifts they should give me, so I can blow the pillow wind to Morton Joe. I glanced at the group names. The name of this group is, there's no Darlene in this group. I was about to type clarification when Chloe pulled Morton Joe into the group. The crowd fell silent all of a sudden. After a few seconds, Morton Joe sent dozens of red envelopes to the group. I looked at the red envelopes on the screen, and it took a lot of effort to control myself from grabbing it. Rather than red envelopes, I still want to listen to my own gossip behind my back. After the red envelope was distributed, Morton Joe began to speak, explain. I'm chasing. I haven't caught up yet. No one dared to take his words. Morton Joe continued, if anyone can offer a valuable proposal to reward a 10-day trip to Europe, I will cover the cost personally. I'm in a hurry. This stupid man. Why don't you get myself involved in this event? Under the temptation of heavy money, the bold one spoke first. If the child is Morton Joe's, you can bring your son to the throne. I guess Morton Joe still remembers my advice not to let his colleagues find out that the cub raising thing is fake for the time being. It took a long time for him to reply solemnly, we must use proper means, and we cannot delusion that the father will be superior to the son, and the next one will be. I remember Darlene used to look at hot guys during breaks. Morton Joe can refer to it. OMG. She was actually encouraging my boss to seduce me with her beauty. Morton Joe seemed to listen and sent her a red envelope alone. I couldn't help myself and found my best colleague and asked her to pull my trumpet in. Then I added Morton Joe as a friend. As soon as he passed, I sent a message. Darlene once said that she broke up with her ex-boyfriend because he didn't answer the phone when she was sick, and she minded it. If that ex-boyfriend is Morton Joe, you can explain why. Sure enough, Morton Joe transferred a sum of money and said, thank you. I counted to 0, and I was just happy to fly. So I continued. She also said that if there was a man who could consciously buy her new skin every time, she would be very impressed. Morton Joe, you can try it. Morton Joe stopped talking this time. I thought he didn't think it was reliable. Also, Darlene likes guys with good figures. So Morton Joe, when he fell in love with Morton Joe, he was nowhere near as mature as he is now. I heard that he has been working out. I'm a little curiosity, just plain curiosity. Morton Joe still doesn't reply. I was a little anxious. Morton Joe, are you still online? I think these two methods are okay. Don't Morton Joe like it? I exited the chat page with him, and saw Morton Joe throwing red envelopes in the group. I estimated that I had written a notebook full of tips for chasing my wife. I was even more anxious. Morton Joe, these are my own tricks. You can try them, and you will succeed. Not only did Morton Joe not speak, but he also disbanded the group chat. The last message sent before disbanding the group chat was, there are undercover agents. Get out quickly. I also took a screenshot of my large profile picture. I was so angry that I threw a set of air combos. I waited for a long time, but I didn't wait for Morton Joe to pull my trumpet into the new group. My colleague just now ignored me. The thought of how many big red envelopes I had missed made me so angry that I slapped my thigh. I decided to remind Morton Joe one more time. Morton Joe, you have to trust me. If you tempt her with your beauty, she will definitely take the bait. Morton Joe is finally moving this time, but it wasn't a red envelope for me. Instead, he said, Darlene, you're so hungry for me. I stared at my phone screen in horror. Worst. I'm like, exposed. My heart was pounding, and I didn't know for a moment whether I should play stupid or dead. If Morton Joe is sure that I secretly taught him to chase me with a trumpet, just to get his red envelope, you're going to laugh at me. I decided to play dumb. Morton Joe, what are you talking about? Is he just lying to me? The dignified and domineering president is actually scaring employees here for a small red envelope. Simply unforgivable. Morton Joe replied, don't pretend. You've used this trick when you're in a relationship. Even the account number is the same. Careless. I already knew how many more trumpets to open. Just as I was pondering how to forcibly save my dignity, Morton Joe struck. He transferred me another sum of money. This is followed by a small essay. The content is to explain why he didn't answer the phone at the time, and why he bought this company. And in the past year or so, he opened more than 20 trumpets in order to add my friends. But unfortunately I didn't pass, and I was blocked for some reason. In short, it's pitiful and funny. I didn't know how to reply for a while, but after thinking about it, I replied with a kissing emoji. 10 minutes later, Morton Joe knocked on my door. At this time, I just swiped the circle of friends he posted. I'm going to confess. If I succeed, I will change my name to I Love Hot Pot, and if I fail, I will never eat hot pot again. The The comments were full of wishes for success. I shook my phone at him. Changing your name. Morton Joe's face froze, and I heard him whisper, "Oops, I forgot to block you." Morton Joe opened the pre-written confession letter on his phone, and began to read it aloud with emotion. After just listening to 3 sentences, I couldn't bear it anymore. "Don't read it, please." "Can't I say yes? If I listen to it any more, I must be embarrassed to death." Before Morton Joe could speak, my phone suddenly started ringing. It was my colleagues, who couldn't wait and came to ask me for news. "10 minutes have passed. You must have all given birth, right? Upstairs is more rigorous. The second child has already been born, right? So what's the boss' new name? That's important to me." Morton Joe was reminded of this and immediately changed his name. His new name is, "I love hot pot to death. I have to eat hot pot every day." Family. No exaggeration. Because of his name, I was laughed at in the company for 3 years. 3 years. They've gradually given up calling me Darlene, choosing instead to call me Hot Pot Sister. Ha, leave me alone. Let me quickly hammer Morton Joe to death. Smile JPG. Not long after getting back together with Morton Joe, he said he was going to arrange another team building. I had a vague sense of something, but I didn't debunk Morton Joe's pretended mystery as he looked. Colleagues also dutifully helped Morton Joe keep the secret. Until the last day of team building, Morton Joe proposed to me. He seems to have prepared a marriage proposal in advance. Seeing him take out his phone, I felt bad. If I read his confession letter in front of so many people, then I will die of embarrassment and social death. So as soon as Morton Joe pulled out his phone, I said eagerly, "Don't read it." "I do." Morton Joe didn't say anything on the spot, but came back to his room in the evening, and asked me if the confession letter he had written was bad. Looking at his expectant eyes, I really couldn't bear to hit him. "It's not rotten. It's just that I'm a little scared." Morton Joe is still waiting for me to answer. I couldn't bear it, and stretched out my hand to him. "I haven't read it yet. You wait for me to see how it is written." I was a little embarrassed to be outside just now. "Just say it to me, alone." Looking at it, I regretted it. This confessional letter is not only not embarrassing, but also touching, tear-jerking. I couldn't hold back and almost cried. Morton Joe looked at me apprehensively. "So ugly. It's all ugly and crying." I looked at him with teary eyes and kissed him directly. If he writes at this level every time, who will stop him from reading it? Morton Joe was stunned for a few seconds, and then quickly turned back. After I got pregnant, he suddenly came back with a lot of baby products and supplements. Remembering that it was still piled up in the room before, I crossed my waist and scolded him. "You have so much money that you have nowhere to spend it, don't you? Why do you buy so much?" He bought it some time ago and hasn't opened it yet. Morton Joe also pointed to the stroller that was occupied by the cat, and said, "The previous ones were all bought for cats, and now these are for future babies. Of course they are different. It's okay, big brother." "Whose cat uses diapers?" I asked Morton Joe to quit, but he wouldn't. "It is said that after it is returned, the future baby will be useless." I rolled my eyes. "Do you want to have a baby and 10 treasures? You have these things before the age of 3, and you can't use them when you grow up." I told you that Morton Joe agreed to give away some of it. However, it was not taken and returned, but sent to colleagues who have children in the company. They also sent me a thank you message, followed by a sentence, "Even having a second child so soon, Morton Joe really has the strength." I don't know if the single mother character of Lily is too successful. Despite my repeated explanations with Morton Joe, we all stubbornly believe that we already have a baby. The turning point of events came after the birth of the child. Morton Joe posted a photo of our family of 3. Someone asked him, "Why didn't you see the boss?" Morton Joe replied, "Mr. S second child. The eldest hasn't been born yet." This time, no one thought he was joking. As for me, I was inevitably besieged by my colleagues. and ended with a 3-day trip to the resort. And while I was packing, I suddenly flipped through a notebook. It is a record of Morton Joe's tips on how to take care of children, and how to deal with the matter of leaving the father and leaving the son. Morton Joe passed by the door and saw me holding my notebook, and looking at it intently. He walked over quickly, snatched the notebook from my hand, hid it behind him, and said casually, "I've packed all the luggage outside. Can you see what else is missing?" Seeing that Morton Joe's ears were red, I didn't say anything, just went out with him to count his luggage. What Morton Joe didn't know was, the first time I saw this notebook, I took a picture of it all, and a new photo album was created for this purpose. In the future, if he makes me angry again, I will use this to punish him. It's fun to think about, ha 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 ha. But I miscalculated, because one time I took out this notebook and tried to threaten Morton Joe. I couldn't get out of bed for 2 days. Morton Joe. 2 years after breaking up with Darlene, I finally found an opportunity to get close to her. I bought her company. The first thing I did after the acquisition was to let all employees of the company add me to Weshit. However, others added Wecom. Only Darlene added a private number. After I was blocked for more than 20 trumpets, I finally had her Weshit again. But I didn't expect that as soon as I added a friend, I saw Darlene post a circle of friends, said she couldn't afford to raise a child. This sentence is really informative. Darlene and I actually have a baby. My Darlene can't afford to raise a baby. My Darlene broke up with me. She must have wanted to go to her father and keep her son. With those 3 points quickly summing up, I went to ask Darlene what was going on. Darlene ignored me. Well, I can't scare her. I'll have to figure it out slowly. But I didn't expect that. When I arrived at the company the next day, I heard from the staff that Darlene was a single mother, and it was very hard to take care of the children. I asked the child's father. I wanted Darlene to tell me why she wanted the child not to want me. However, the colleague said that the child's father died. Outrageous. Darlene repeatedly explained that it was her nonsense, and that there were no children at all. I don't believe it. The photos have been turned out by my colleagues. Ahaha, that's a picture of Darlene's little niece. It's weird cute. I was like, I looked a little like me. Fortunately, I didn't say it. Otherwise I really wouldn't have been able to raise my head for 3 years. Later, when I went to Darlene's house, I saw my little niece. It's really carved out of the same mold as when she was a child. Our future children should be so cute, right? After my tireless efforts, I finally knew where Darlene's knot was, and I was able to explain it successfully. The only thing that didn't work out was that Darlene seemed afraid of me writing to her. When I proposed, I rewrote the letter 28 times and she said yes before I could read it. Although she later praised me for my good writing, I was still a little sad. It seems that I will have to write more and practice more in the future. Things are starting to get bad. After Darlene's single mom personality collapsed, she offered to take her colleagues to play. This would have been a good thing. But as Darlene was packing, she flipped through to a notebook. It was full of my dissatisfaction with her going to her father and son, and what I thought of to deal with it. It's a shame. I grabbed it and said it was another price. Who knew that Darlene actually filmed it? Later, they tried to threaten me. Forget it. As long as she's happy. Shame on you. How can face be as important as a wife? The end.